Lord Robert Stevenson Smythe Baden-Powell of Gilwell. But when he was around Scouts, he was simply BP. And by the way, the correct pronunciation of his name is Powell, like in hole, not Powell, like in owl. This week, let's learn more about the founder of the Scouting movement in this edition of Artifact of the Week. Baden-Powell was born February 22, 1857 in London, England. He was the sixth of 7 children. His father, Professor Baden-Powell of Oxford University, was a clergyman with theories about evolution which were controversial in church circles of the time. His mother, Henrietta Grace Smythe, was the socially active daughter of an admiral. Professor Powell died when BP was 3, and Henrietta added his first name to the family name, separated by a hyphen in his honor. As a child, he attended a boarding school for boys called Charterhouse, but schoolwork wasn't really his forte. BP was much more interested in being outdoors, and during the summers, he and his brothers spent much of their time camping. One summer, they canoed all the way across England, portaging their canoes from river to river, sleeping in barns and haystacks, catching rabbits and fish for food, and cooking their meals over open fires. When BP graduated from Charterhouse, his plan was to follow his brothers and earn a scholarship to attend Oxford University. He took the entrance exam, but much to his mother's chagrin, he failed and was denied admission. Soon after, BP saw a newspaper advertisement for examinations to join the British Army. Those with the highest scores would become Army officers. Now, Baden-Powell took the next few months to study math, English, science, geography, and foreign languages in preparation for these exams. Much to his surprise, the tests also included a skill he had enjoyed his entire life, freehand drawing. His efforts paid off as he qualified 5th for infantry and 2nd for cavalry. Soon after, he received his first set of orders, and in the autumn of 1876, he boarded a ship and sailed to India to join his new regiment, the 13th Hussars, one of the most famous regiments in the British Army. BP's time in India was a great adventure and laid the foundation for skills such as map making and surveying, which he would further hone in later assignments. Following his time in India, he was sent to the Balkans, where he was ordered to gather information on the movements and fortifications of Austrian troops in the area. In order to complete this dangerous mission, BP carried a butterfly net and a sketch pad. He pretended to be a somewhat lost and confused Englishman studying butterflies. Under the watchful eyes of police and military authorities, he would catch butterflies near Austrian military forts and proceed to sketch them into his notepad, hiding the details of gun emplacements and other military intelligence in the maps that were also disguised within the sketch of the butterfly. As BP rose through the ranks of the British Army, he started to think about the best way to train soldiers to get them to think for themselves and to be able to serve effectively as military scouts. Over time, he collected these thoughts and training plans, and then while on a bear hunting trip to Kashmir, he wrote a book to train soldiers for reconnaissance work using backwoods skills such as living off the land, tracking, stalking, and horsemanship. In 1899, his small book called Aids to Scouting for NCOs and Men began to be sold in England. BP was sent to South Africa, where the British Army was in conflict with the Boers, settlers of Dutch descent. His assignment was to defend the town of Mafeking. Under his command, he had about 1,200 men, and opposing the British were several thousand Boer soldiers. When BP refused their demands to surrender, they laid siege to the town, and BP drew upon his scouting and outdoor skills that he had developed throughout his life to convince the Boers that the town was defended by a much larger and capable force. Using tricks and deception, BP and his troops were able to defend the town and hold out for 218 days before elements of the British Army were able to arrive and break the Boers' siege. Following the siege at Mafeking, BP returned to England, where he learned he was being hailed a hero for not allowing Mafeking to fall to the Boers. He also learned that his book, Aids to Scouting, had been adopted by many schools and youth organizations as a tool to teach ethics, self-reliance, problem-solving, and woodcraft skills to boys and girls. BP had no idea his book and its lessons would have such a profound impact on the youth of England, and was surprised to see crowds of boys cheering for him and holding up copies of his book like it was a primer for living a life based on these lessons and virtues. During a 1906 visit to London, Ernest Thompson Seton and Baden-Powell met to discuss their shared ideas about a youth program that used woodcraft skills and outdoor experiences as a training method to help develop youth into better citizens. At the end of the meeting, BP presented Seton with a copy of his book, Aids to Scouting, and Seton gave BP a copy of his recently published manual, The Birch Bark Rolls of the Woodcraft Indians. Following this meeting, BP began writing his Scheme for Scouting, and it was officially published in May of 1907. This document outlined the aims and methods of his proposed scouting program. He also began to rewrite Aids to Scouting, adding content, some of which was inspired by Seton's Birch Bark Rolls, and by making the remaining content more appropriate for young boys as peacetime scouts. The new book was renamed Scouting for Boys. In August of 1907, BP put his ideas to the test at a camp held at Brownsea Island, just off the coast of England. He invited boys from different social backgrounds to the camp, which was outside of the normal class-conscious English society. The camp and experiences at Brownsea Island confirmed the value and effectiveness of BP's scouting program. He was certain scouting could teach boys greater self-reliance and skills like woodcraft, observation, and deduction. Together, these would guide them to grow into better men, and that, of course, would help them be better citizens. After Brownsea Island, BP made some final adjustments to Scouting for Boys, and in 1908, it was published as 6 booklets over a 12-week period. While in his Scheme for Scouting, BP envisioned existing youth organizations and schools using his program as content within their organizational structure, he now saw that the boys themselves wanted to be Boy Scouts in their own organization. Boys were already organizing their own patrols and setting out on their own camping adventures, but many of them had no adult leadership and no real clear plan of action. BP realized that if his vision for scouting was to have a chance and fully deliver on its promises, he would have to make it his full-time job to organize the Boy Scouts. He retired from the Army and began to implement his scheme for scouting. The Boy Scouts would be a character-building program using the outdoors as both classroom and laboratory. It would be a challenging and satisfying environment for the boys who joined, but most importantly, it would be fun. To meet the need for adult leadership of his new organization, he put out the call for volunteers, and men from all over England immediately stepped up. BP designed a uniform for the Boy Scouts that was very similar to the uniform boys and young men in the South African Constabulary War during his time in Mafeking. This uniform was simple, inexpensive, and comfortable. It consisted of a khaki short and shirt, a neckerchief, a wide-brimmed hat, long stockings, and a wooden staff. Throughout the British Empire, boys and adults began to organize troops. Scouting was beginning to spread around the world. By 1909, unofficial troops and a variety of scout-like organizations began appearing in the United States. For example, an English missionary from the Church of England traveled to Oklahoma to serve the Native American population there. In Pawhuska, he established a troop. During this time, William D. Boyce, a Chicago newspaper publisher, made his now famous trip to London and returned to the United States with trunks full of scouting materials, uniforms, and information. In February of 1910, Boyce incorporated the Boy Scouts of America. As scouting was growing and proving successful everywhere it appeared, BP saw the need to expand the program to include boys under the age of 11. To meet this need, he organized the Wolf Cubs in Great Britain. Now, one of BP's friends was Rudyard Kipling, the author of Jungle Book, and this new younger boy program was based on characters and lessons that could be found in Kipling's writings. In the 1930s, the BSA used the Wolf Scout program as the foundation for their new program for younger scouts called Cub Scouting. Together with his sister Agnes, they founded the Girl Guides in 1910, which of course is the precursor to Girl Scouts. He also developed a detailed scheme for training adult leaders in the patrol method and outdoor skills, including wood badge. And recognizing the use of scouting as a movement for peace, he brought the Scouts of the world together for the first jamboree in England in 1920, where he was proclaimed Chief Scout of the world. He was honored by dozens of countries, created a baron, awarded the Watler Peace Prize, and nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Baden-Powell spent the rest of his life devoted to the youth of the world. One of BP's lasting messages to scouting is, the real way to get happiness is by giving out happiness to other people. Try and leave the world a little better than you found it, and when your turn comes to die, you can die happy and feeling that at any rate you have not wasted your time, but done your best. That's all the time we have for this week. Join us next time as we continue to uncover the history of the BSA through the collection of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.